Welcome everybody to our second rework. I'm Laszlo Bock, the head of people operations here at Google. It means a tremendous amount to me that you all took time out of your days and schedules to travel and get here and be part of this. Thank you. I'm really grateful. So we, in 2008, 2009, did something called a People Innovation Lab Summit. We have a People Innovation Lab at Google, and we brought a bunch of outsiders into Google. At the time, we weren't sharing anything that we did on the people side, because it was proprietary and competitive advantage and top secret, and we wanted to win in the marketplace for talent. But we thought, you know what, we don't know everything, so let's bring in some friendlies, some academics, and talk to them and compare notes, and it was amazing. And Jennifer Kokoski, who you saw this morning, was one of the originators and the person who coordinated the first Pi Lab Summit that we had. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally we said, what if we could actually do more by sharing more of what we do and bringing more minds together? So about 18 months ago, in 2014, we had our first rework, which was a collection like this, invitation-only gathering, where we will share the videos publicly. But the conversations that happen among you are the most important part, because this is a phenomenal, phenomenal group of people. And I'll talk more about you. But the idea is to make work better everywhere. And we think there's something in the kinds of people we gather today and the topics we're going to cover that will do that. Last year, we had companies represented ranging from Bank of America to Teach for America to Virgin America. We don't have companies with names that work quite as humorously this time around, unfortunately, but despite our best efforts. But we do have representation from some remarkable, remarkable places. And to give you a sense of how cross-functional this is and cross-industry this is, we, of course, have Silicon Valley startups. So we have folks from Slack and Gusto, and it's okay. Yes. One person applauded, so that's great. If everyone would just individually applaud for themselves as we go. But I like it. Let's give Slack a round of applause. Just for participating, because everyone's a winner here. From Gusto, from Khan Academy, but we also have some interesting startups that aren't your traditional Silicon Valley startups. We have representatives from Farm Girl Flowers, which is reinventing how to get fresh bouquets to people in a socially responsible, environmentally sensitive way. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful business they've built. Emissaries is focused on solving the problem that as companies implement more and more family-friendly policies, and we'll be talking about this throughout the day, how do companies fill those vacancies that are temporary, that are left by people taking parental leave? And so Emissaries finds freelancers and fills those jobs. It's an amazing business. We have people from the food industry. Some of them whose names sound like they're invading us from outer space. We have Kroger, we have Mars. We also have some really, really cool places like we have folks from Dave's Killer Bread here. And Dave's Killer Bread, yeah, that's okay. Really cool model. They started with having a workforce of people who were convicted criminals, convicted felons. And their thesis is, just because something bad happened in your life doesn't make you a bad person, and we can find mission and find meaning and give you something great. And if more institutions did that, and we'll hear more about that, this would be a different kind of nation, a different kind of world. We have folks from the healthcare space, from the Cleveland Clinic. Our good friends are here. Mike Roizen I saw earlier today. Mayo Clinic, Omada Health. We have folks from the entertainment industry, which is actually a little new for us. So we have folks from CAA, from Fox, from NBC, also from Macro and a whole bunch of different areas, and not just agents and people who put packages together, but creators. So really, really compelling group of folks today. I'm super excited to hear from them. Lots of academics. Love our academics from every fancy university you can name. And a Google event would not be complete without a nod to the conspiracy theorists. So we, of course, have folks from NASA, the Air Force, and the White House here. So, you know, watch for the chemtrails after the event. In all seriousness, for those folks, thank you for being here and for all you do for all of us. So it's an amazing group of institutions that we have here, but equally amazing are the individuals, those of you who have come here. So we did a pre-survey where we asked you a bunch of completely invasive questions, including what did your grandparents do for a living, what did your parents do, and what do you do for a living? And in one of my pockets, we're very technologically advanced here at Google. But there were a bunch of these that really jumped out at me. If you go back a couple generations, my grandfather on my mother's side was a mechanic. My grandmother didn't work. And this person's first job was a weekend janitor. And they're now a professor at one of the finest universities in the land. Here's another couple people. What did your grandparents do? A nurse, a janitor, a preschool teacher. Grandfather was in the French Foreign Legion. My grandparents were a plumber and a nurse midwife. And by the way, that person's first job was making powdered horchata at an AM/PM mini market. But these are not the kind of jobs you would expect based on the introduction I just gave, where we have these luminaries and people running and founding incredible companies. A few more. Grandparents' jobs: farmer, secretary, dairy worker, bootlegger. That one's pretty good. There's a beautiful one if you start connecting the dots across the generations too. My maternal grandmother was a nurse. My maternal grandfather was a porter with the New York City Transit Authority. My grandfather on my dad's side was a train operator and a postman. My grandmother was a homemaker. My father was a pediatrician. Imagine what those grandparents must have felt when their kid became a pediatrician, right? And that person will sort of be sharing things in the interstitials between sessions, but that person is one of the most thoughtful, creative innovators in the entertainment space here today. And it is an amazing thing what this person is building and has done. And a completely risky and crazy thing too, but brilliant. Few more. Grandparents: farmer, farming, farmers. Next generation: road construction, high school teacher. What did they become? An executive at a technology company that I won't name, and a professor at the University of Michigan. My grandmas were maids. One grandfather owned a tree nursery. Mom was a nurse. My grandfather was a postal worker. What's amazing to me about this is 2 generations ago, merely 2 generations ago, our grandparents could not have imagined what we would be doing today. Not only because of the success you have all experienced, but because of the kinds of work you do. It just completely transcends what people could have imagined 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago. And so the challenge for us in part is, what are things going to be like 1 or 2 generations from now? Because I would put to you that jobs are going to be completely different, and the kind of work people are going to be doing are going to change just as much as they had in the past. But it's a remarkable place all of you have come from, and a remarkable legacy and heritage and DNA that you're building on. We're lucky to have you here, so thank you. And what I'd urge you is, that's okay, you can applaud, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm so starved for affection that I'll take like any small nod. Thank you. But I'll urge you in the breaks and throughout the day to ask people, who's who, and get to know people on that level too. Because one of the things we hope comes out of this, that has come out of this in the past, is actual real research and real change in how businesses work. But those relationships are important, and appreciating each other as people and the depth you bring to it takes us to a whole other level. So work has been changing on an individual level for a long time, but management has been changing as well. So everybody's seen these kind of pictographs where modern pictographs where we talk about how things have changed. I won't bore everyone with the history of work. We've lived it real time. But we're all familiar with who started counting people on assembly lines. Can someone help me? Where does this come from? The scientific, who? Taylor, thank you. So Taylor started looking at this a long time ago. What was happening was work became professionalized. Statistics, analytics was brought to production for the first time. And that happened over decades. And then after World War II, you had Deming go to Japan and develop what became Six Sigma and so on. Then not that long ago, marketing became professionalized. Marketing went from this kind of Mad Men era of I'm going to do something cool and trust my gut and get people's attention, to what Time Inc. actually was a pioneer of in the 1980s, which was consumer marketing, building a database of people, understanding their interests and preferences. In a way, Time Inc. was actually the Google of the 1980s. I mean, they tried to figure out what was going on, and they tried to target advertising as best they could, right? It was an amazing, amazing thing. And the same thing is now happening in the science of people. Because everybody, if you say, do you want work to be better? Do you want work to suck a little less? People will say, yeah, I do. But how you do it, you don't actually know. Because everyone has a gut feeling about it. And our gut feelings, as we know, are often wrong. And how we think about management, how we think about hiring and promotion, we do all these irrational, unconscious things that make us make bad decisions, that make us discriminate, that make us screen out qualified people, that make us overlook people who have criminal records, that make us do all these bad things that lead to worse workplaces. And so what's happening now, though, slowly in the people space, is science is coming to it. And it's not new science, by the way. I was talking earlier with our friends from the Air Force. Military's been doing this stuff for 80 years. Academics have been looking at this stuff for decades. But business is finally starting to pay attention, and government is starting to pay closer attention. The aspiration would be that when you make people decisions, at least at Google, our goal is that they're rooted in data and analytics. Not that data and analytics replace the people, but that they inform and influence the decisions. There was a journal article written in the early 90s that talked about doctors and how they make diagnoses. And what they found was that a doctor, left to his or her own devices, can make a pretty good diagnosis of an illness. But in the early 90s, you could also generate an algorithm that would say, do you have a fever? Do you not? Do you have a stomachache? Do you not? A heuristic that would then actually make a pretty good diagnosis that was just about as good as a doctor. And what was interesting was if you combined the two and had the doctor made a diagnosis and had this computer make a diagnosis, the doctor would then revise his or her opinion and actually make a better, more accurate, more predictive diagnosis than doing it by himself or herself. And I read this journal article in 1998, and it had already been out for a decade, and I was like, how come no one's doing this? And the reason is, when it comes to people stuff, we all think we're right. We all think we can assess someone. We all think we know how to manage. And the reality is, by definition, we're all kind of average at it. And average is not great. But if you can supplement our decision making when it comes to people with some science, you do much, much better for your people. You create better workplaces. You create more productivity, more efficiency, more effectiveness. There's actually good business outcomes. And you treat people better, which is a moral and ethical goal that by itself is worth going for, even if it didn't also save you money and do these other things. And so this is something we've been spending a lot of time on over the last decade at Google. But it's becoming bigger and bigger in the popular culture too. So we've all seen the headlines. Some of you have been in the headlines. Why we make bad decisions, why introverted teachers are burning out, motivation, brain teasers, and job interviews. So people writ large are kind of curious about this stuff. Because at the end of the day, any of the work you are all doing to think about how to make work better is actually telling each individual, how can I make myself better? How can I make a better decision? How can I know something more about myself? And the most interesting topic in the world for anybody is me. I don't mean me personally, I mean each of you individually. I'm pretty interesting, I'm not that interesting. But it's not just in the popular imagining people are getting interested. If you look at startups have raised over $1 billion, creating companies and generate way more value, trying to figure out how to bring more science to judgment in the people sphere. This is like a real thing. Lots of money, lots of smart people focusing on how to make this better. Slack's one example of that. Phenomenal success. And it comes from this kind of thing. So what's happened over the last decade or so is this field of people analytics has been created. The term people analytics, so this is data from a Google Trends search. So if you can go on Google Trends, look for people analytics, didn't really exist as a phrase until not that long ago. But it's a legitimate thing. People are investing in it. People are wanting to do business differently. And the effect of it will be, I think, that organizations that figure this stuff out, that bring a little more science to what they do, are going to win when it comes to attracting talent. Because there's actually two ways to make a lot of money as an organization, as a company. You can treat people really well and give them freedom and reward them, and do things thoughtfully based on science, which supplements your human intuition, and you can actually end up with a great work environment, and people will love working there, and they'll be productive and happy. And there's tons of evidence. If you compare places like Costco and Walmart, there's research done on like Nike factories where they do A/B tests in Mexico to see what makes people more productive. But you can also make a lot of money by treating people really badly. Because as long as we have massive income inequality, as long as we have massive unemployment, as long as we have people who are like checked out of the workforce and struggling to get in or have given up, as long as we have gender differences in how people think about their careers, there's going to be a lot of people in the US alone who are just hungry for a job, and they'll take whatever they can get. And the problem's even bigger in other countries. And you can make a lot of money doing that. And you hire somebody, treat them pretty badly, squeeze out whatever productivity you can, and then you just throw them away and hire somebody else. The question for all of us is, how do we get more organizations to be more like the first case? Because over time, over decades, I believe that model will win. And the most talented people in the world will want to be in those kind of environments. And they're going to go there, and productivity will improve relative to other places, and they win. That's going to take decades. So how do we accelerate that? How do we bring people analytics to the present? How do we change how work happens now in the worst places? And part of that is today. because it's the conversations you have, but it's the scale you get from people who are going to talk about what's happened today later, the videos people are going to watch later, the word that's going to get out, the coverage we're going to get. It's changing the world. It's a unique moment, I think, in human history, because we have data to actually figure this stuff out and prove it. We've had generations of like consultants and writers and people standing up saying like, here's how I think it should be done. We have the ability to know how people should be treated. And not just know, but to experiment. To look across different companies or different parts of organizations or different parts of the government and say, we're going to try it this way here and this way another place, and we're going to see what works. And we're going to control for all the noise that will make it look like correlation, but not a causal relationship. And we're going to be able to tell people, if you want to be an effective manager, here are the 8 things you should do. If you want new people more productive, here's the 5 things you should do. If you want people happier, you give them freedom, and we can prove giving people more freedom makes them happier, which then causes more productivity. Only now do we have the technology to start doing that and the expertise to start doing that. So Rework, I'll just talk briefly about this, is an effort to do that. So we have this platform, this website. It's free. We're putting a bunch of Google content out there. We're also trying to highlight and showcase other organizations doing amazing things. So for example, JetBlue. In their service operations, they reduced turnover by 50%. 50%. And they didn't have a team of 30 PhDs doing all kinds of gee whiz rocket science analytics. They basically asked their managers, what are the attributes you most need in your employees that make them successful? And they asked their employees, what attributes do you think make you most successful? They looked at the 2 lists, they found the overlap, they changed their hiring process to screen for those things, they hired better. 50% reduction in turnover in a service operations center. It's amazing. And that kind of achievement, that kind of contribution, all kinds of organizations are doing it, and it applies in a lot of different places. So at Google, we used to keep our stuff secret. There's still stuff we keep secret, a little bit. But our thought was the greater good is served by putting more stuff out there. And the greater good is served by having a platform where other people can get more stuff out there. So I invite you to take a look, but that's part of what we're doing and part of what we're a part of here. And I'm grateful for you all participating in that. We handpicked many of you, really all of you, because it was by invitation, because we thought having the right balance of folks in this room creates a virtuous cycle. And this is, there's always 3 parts to a framework. And there's always like buzzwordy labels. I think we also, one of the questions we asked are, what buzzwords should die? And somebody wrote influencers, so sorry. I'm open to synonyms. But the idea is we have people who actually do the research who will give us truth. That's a source of truth, right? We have people who actually put it into practice because it's not enough to experiment on college sophomores. You actually have to put it in place, which isn't all, you do more than that, I know. But you also need to try it in a bunch of different environments to see what truths actually are generalizable and which are true only for certain segments of the population. And then you need to tell that story. And that's really hard to do. Because it's noble and meaningful to do good work, but it's more impactful if you can tell the story and get other people excited about it and change the world. So I want to close with a couple thoughts about what we might be able to do together. We asked you, what kind of problems are top of mind, and people did talk about things like inclusion. People did talk about income inequality. People talked about performance management. People talked about, how to have fairness in the workforce. Lots and lots of good topics. But I want to push us a little bit further. Everyone in this room has some familiar with the concept of there's something called anchoring bias. Right? Anchoring bias is the idea that if you throw out a number, people kind of gravitate towards it, right? This is why restaurants will have a $1,000 bottle of wine on the wine list, because people say, whoa, that's really expensive. And then the $30 bottle of wine looks like a great deal, even though it's actually only a $2 bottle of wine if you buy it at Trader Joe's. But people buy it. People anchor on that number, and that becomes their reference point. Now think about the gender wage gap. If people understood anchoring bias the way all of you think about it in this room, which is, I'm going to pay somebody based on their prior salary. I'm going to anchor on that, and then I'm going to make them an offer. If people instead said, wait a minute, that's anchoring bias, maybe we wouldn't have a wage gap. Maybe companies would actually say, you know what? I'm not going to pay this woman, who statistically speaking is paid 70 to 90 cents on the dollar for what a man is in her prior job. I'm not going to pay her based on that. I'm going to pay her based on what the job is. That happens to be what we do here. But if every company understood that the way you understand that, maybe no wage gap, which would be amazing. Unconscious bias. There's been a lot in the press about the last few years about unconscious bias. We've been doing unconscious bias programs at Google for at least the last 4 or 5 years. There's a kit on our rework site. But you all understand the space. You understand how powerful and pervasive and not bad. It's just part of the human condition. We're not evil because we're biased. It's just who we are. We're human beings. That's how we evolved. We'll deal with it. We'll figure out a way to fix it. We've been having this amazing, powerful national conversation in the United States about race for the last couple of years. Going back to Ferguson, going back to Maryland, going back to all these things that have happened in the United States over the last few years. And it's important and cathartic, and we're nowhere near through that conversation. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates is a really eloquent advocate and proponent of, from my perspective at least, truth on these topics. But imagine what that conversation would be in our country if everyone understood unconscious bias. Because in your day-to-day life, we don't bump into that many people who are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic. They're out there. But in most of society, it doesn't bubble to the surface. But it's absolutely there under the surface, unconsciously, even if we don't realize it. If every one of us understood that, we might be a very different place. On the education front, Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. What if everyone understood that as much as the people in this room understood growth mindset? Or Chris Argyris' work about teaching people to learn from failure. And we'll be joined in just a minute by Astro Teller, who will talk about learning from failure. But what if everyone understood that you can grow and learn in the way that you all understand that potential? What if everyone understood that part of the reason people fail is because they don't learn from failure? They get stuck, they plateau. Now think about education, and think about how kids get tracked into the medium math, the high math, or the low math because of how you do in 7th grade or 6th grade or 2nd grade, right? Think of what happens in inner city communities where people get stuck in an environment and they're told, this is who you are, this is destiny. And they're not told, you can be whoever the hell you want. And you have the power to do that. And when I look at your bios, a lot of you have come from those kinds of origins. There's somebody here who, they said my mom was a single mom and we were below the poverty line my entire life and she worked whatever job she could get. That person's an executive at an amazing company. Not at Google, at another company, and is here today. If everyone understood growth mindset, how different would we run our educational system? And so this, I think, is the opportunity that's facing us. We're going to share all kinds of cool, amazing stuff, and we're going to put it out there for the world to see too. But my hope, my ask is that we also use it as a way to engage on these bigger questions. These may not be the right ones. These are just illustrations. But think of the kind of place the world could be if people understood the things we're going to talk about today that you all know, but that aren't obvious and that you don't learn normally. The opportunity here is tremendous. So thank you for joining today. Thank you for contributing and for participating.